Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good evening. I'm really delighted to welcome you to the launch of the Centre for Autism Wellbeing Hub this evening. Obviously, welcome and to all of you who are here in person, and congratulations for braving this rather nasty, wet, cold evening. But welcome to everyone who's joining us online. I know a large number of people are joining online this evening. I have a few notices before we start the evening proper. We are recording the presentations this evening, but we will be removing any questions and answers from the recording before we make it public. A few more notices. We're not expecting any fire alarms this evening, but if the fire alarm does go off, we leave the lecture theatre by the fire exit here, leave the building, and then gather on the quad opposite the library, just outside the library, which is opposite this building. And then a few other things just to say about how the evening's been organised. We want everyone to be able to enjoy this evening. And so Fiona and Joe have gone to a lot of trouble to make sure it's comfortable and accessible to everybody. So if anybody would like to listen to the presentations in a different room, we have a second room where there's a live feed of the presentations, and that's in the ground floor, room 6, which is just next to the ladies' toilets. If anybody would like to make use of the quiet room we have available, it's on the first floor, and you can get there either by going out of these doors up the stairs and left, or leaving the lecture theatre by the doors at the top there, and it's just nearby on the first floor. I think everybody's wearing a sticker, but just in case anyone doesn't have a sticker or isn't sure what the stickers are about, just a quick reminder. We have these stickers so that people can choose who approaches them to talk to them this evening. So if you're wearing a green sticker, this means that you're happy for anyone to approach you. If you're wearing an orange sticker, this means that you prefer to be approached only by people who you know. And if you're wearing a red sticker, it means that you prefer to not be approached by someone, but you might wish to approach someone yourself. So just a reminder of what those mean. And then finally, a note about the toilets. This is to let you know that they are outside on the ground floor, just opposite across the hallway, but also to ask you to please avoid using the hand dryers in the toilets and use the paper towels instead, just to keep the noise levels down. So thank you for that. So just a note about the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Carmel Houston-Price and I'm the head of the school. I wanted to say a bit about the school and how we engage with the local community. We have a very long history of working in partnership with the local community in a large number of ways. In fact, I asked colleagues last year to let me know about how they work with the local community. And I was able to write up pages and pages and pages of a list of all the different ways that my colleagues are working with people locally. Just some examples on the list here tonight. Obviously, our students go out on placement in order to find out what it means to work in the real world. And so we have students doing placements in local businesses, charities, NHS services, public organisations, private organisations, and so on. And these are really important to how our students develop. We also work closely with the local community in our research. So members of the community take part in research as participants, but they also take part as collaborators, joining us in designing research so that we make sure we are asking the right questions and finding out what really needs to be found out. And then a third way that our school is perhaps a little bit unusual in working with the local community is through the service we provide in our clinics. And in the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences, we have several clinics. You may have heard about the Andy Clinic, which is an NHS service that provides treatment to children and young people with anxiety and depression. And we have speech and language therapy clinics that work with adults, paediatric age groups, and a social communication and preschool group as well. And we're very proud of the services these provide, in addition to services you can take benefit from elsewhere. So it seems only appropriate that we're adding to this list this evening with our new Wellbeing Hub. Autism research has been a big part of what we do in the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences, and the Centre for Autism Research Group has grown in strength in recent years with several new key appointments. And so in the light of this area of research strength and our interest in working in partnership and supporting the local community, I'm really delighted that we've been able to launch the Wellbeing Hub this evening. So I'd like to invite Professor Robert van der Noort, the university's Vice-Chancellor, to formally open this launch event.
Thank you, Kamal, and thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome to the University of Reading if you're new to us, or welcome back if you've been here before. Welcome to those who are in the room with me here today, those who are in the quiet room, and those who are following us online. I think those of you who are online have probably taken the right decision to stay dry and well. Now, I'm delighted to be part of this launch event for the Center of Autism Wellbeing Hub here at the University of Reading. We know there was a huge interest in this venture, and we had over 600 bookings of people to attend the launch event, being either here today with us or being nice at home and following us online. And I know there's a very broad range of people here attending this launch event, both my colleagues from the university and many of our students. There are autistic people and their families, and there are professionals from cross education, health, and the social care sectors. And the interest in this event is clearly a strong indication of the level of commitment to improving outcomes for autistic people that we all support. Now, tonight we're doing something differently. Normally, a launch event would be around mulling around, having awkward conversations with a glass of cheap Prosecco. Don't worry, we're not going to do anything like that. What we want to do is create an innovative event that is not just hybrid, but designed to be autism friendly in every possible way. So as Kamel just said, we are here today, we have an online presence, we have a quiet room, we have a live feed room, and the communication indicators, the stickers you wear, is a way of hoping to make everybody comfortable. And what we're trying to show is our commitment to inclusive practices from the very first moment this Wellbeing Hub starts. Now, why is this Wellbeing Hub important to the university, to its community, and to myself as Vice Chancellor? I'm Vice Chancellor here for 5 and a bit years, and part of what one does as a Vice Chancellor is design a new strategy of the things you want to achieve in time of being the boss of an organization as wonderful and diverse as this. And two of the key principles that I wanted to bring in is one, a care for the community that is made up of our colleagues and our students, but also to recognize that the history of the university started with us being a school of art and science for the education of the people in Reading. And when we became an Oxford Extension College, again, that was very much to support people who live in Reading to develop their skills and their attitudes through education. And I felt, having been here before I became Vice Chancellor, a bit that we had lost something of the essence of a university by being very globally focused, by chasing, global reputations, and having in that process maybe forgotten a little bit about the origin of the university and how we have a responsibility to the people of Reading, Wokingham, and the broader Thames Valley. And I think what this venture does, what the Wellbeing Hub does, absolutely embodies what I'm trying to achieve as Vice Chancellor, a university that works with its community of staff and students, but also works with its local communities to get the best for all of us out of this. We are a diverse and inclusive, and hopefully a supportive community of people, colleagues, students, of alumni, and those of you who live around us. We want to use our knowledge and our skills to collectively solve problems and create opportunities to the benefit of people and the planet. And we want to work with partners to play a positive role in the life of our local communities. So all these aspects are central to the Wellbeing Hub, which aims to bring people together in the spirit of collaboration and indeed curiosity to support autistic children and their families to live their best lives, however they choose to live it. Now, before I give handover and formally declare the Wellbeing Hub open, I have some thank yous to make. First, this initiative has only been made possible thanks to funding from the University of Reading, but also importantly from university donors. And I would especially like to thank our alumnus, Dr. David M. Smith, for his generous bequest, which has enabled us to launch the Wellbeing Hub today. And second, I want to thank the young people, the parents and the professionals who took part in the scoping study, which will be discussed in a moment, but which created the Wellbeing Hub. So I declare this Wellbeing Hub formally opened, but there are people who know much more about this than I do. So I'm very pleased to hand over to Dr. Fiona Knott, our clinical director. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you. I'd like to add my thanks to everybody for coming tonight and to say how excited I am that we've got such a large group of people here who want to be with us on our journey into creating our Wellbeing Hub. What I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about where the idea came from in the first place and some of the initial thoughts that we've been having about what we might do in our Wellbeing Hub. So a couple of years ago, actually it was 2 years and 2 weeks, because I checked the emails before we came out. I was contacted by our alumni donor team, funding team, who said they were aware of the really significant crisis that there is in mental health for children and young people, and said, would we be interested in creating a project that might be something we could do to support autistic children and young people locally? So obviously we said yes, and then we spent some time thinking about what that project might look like. And the context is that I know all of you will be aware of the crisis in mental health. And if you're autistic, then it's even more significant. So we know that about 70% of autistic children and young people will have a mental health condition like anxiety or depression. We know that nationally, services are really struggling to provide support for all children and young people. But again, if you're autistic, you face additional barriers to accessing that support. And when you get that support, it may not be appropriate for you because it may not be based on what your needs are. So working with the for our children and young people locally and for their families and the people who support them. But also really importantly, provide training opportunities for our placement students. And Carmel's mentioned some of the ways that we do that already in our school. And also support autism research activity. So as Professor Van den Oort said, we have a long tradition of autism research in our school. And if you join us after this event over the refreshments, then there's a chance to meet some of our academics and look at some research posters of our most recent autism related research. So we were given this extraordinary brief, and it really is an amazing opportunity to start from scratch. And we spent quite a lot of time talking to people about what we might do, talking to autistic people, to families, and thinking about what we could do that could make a difference. But we fairly quickly realised that we also need to be really clear about what we can't do. And the reason for that is we are a really tiny team. So when we're at full capacity, there'll be 3 part-time staff, a part-time administrator, and of course our MSc placement students. So because of that, we know that we can't offer crisis support or even direct mental health interventions to children and young people. And that's because we wouldn't even be a drop in the ocean. We wouldn't even be as much as that. So we thought we need to think creatively about what we can do. And in our conversations, words like well-being and flourishing came up time and time and time again. And we started to think about the fact that well-being is far more than just the absence of ill health. Well-being is leading your best life. It's accessing education. It's doing the things you love to do. It's having relationships with people who mean something to you. So we thought, can we flip the narrative and think about how we promote well-being rather than just try and treat mental ill health? That was our first thing. And then we realised that we actually know quite a lot about autistic distress and autistic mental ill health, but we know almost nothing about autistic wellbeing and autistic thriving, and particularly from the perspectives of autistic children and adults. And that's basically because nobody until relatively recently has started asking autistic people and adults about wellbeing. So that means that a lot of what we do and the supports that we offer, the interventions that we might have, even the goals that we set, or the ways that we measure outcomes are based on what non-autistic people say they want and what non-autistic people say works for them. So that led us to the thing that is absolutely the most important thing for all of us who are involved in the Wellbeing Hub, which is placing autistic voices absolutely at the heart of everything we do. And that's why today we're so excited about this chance to build an inclusive community of autistic people and their allies, so people who care about them, their friends, their families, people who work with them, to try to build creative and meaningful solutions that will help us support autistic young people to live their best lives. And we've got some ideas about the way we're going to do this. So we want to be involved in research, and actually we're going to do something shortly that's a research activity. We know we will work with autistic young people and their families to co-design and develop activities that they tell us are helpful. And we also will train our practitioners of the future and current practitioners in neurodiversity affirming techniques that, again, autistic people tell us are the ones that help them. So I said there's an opportunity to start with some research today. So we are going to invite you to take part in some research. So we're going to ask you two questions. One is, what does autistic thriving mean to you? We're going to do that shortly. And then a second question later, which Joe's going to ask, which is some ideas about where we can go from here. So we're going to do this using something called Mentimeter. So this is something that you'll access through your mobile phone or your laptop or whatever if you're at home. I need to just give you a bit of information, then I'll explain how that works. So this is a research project that's been given ethical approval by our school. Because we're using Mentimeter, we won't be asking for any personal information at all. And I can reassure you that we can't link back your answers to your phones or to whichever device you're using. We won't be able to record consent. So I need to tell you that if you take part, then that implies that you're consenting. And if you're thinking, oh no, I haven't got my phone or anything's working, don't worry. What we're going to do with the data the ideas that we get today is we're going to turn these into a survey that we'll send out in due course to help us refine the ideas that we start to collect today. So this is kind of part one, really, of the project. So if you would like to take part, we'd be really delighted. So the first thing is open your phones or whatever, and open something called menti.com, which will look on your phone a bit like this screen. And I'm shortly going to flip over to Mentimeter, and you'll then see a code that you type into your phone and then click join. Now, if the magic works. Yes. So the code is 62032285. So you put that code in and you'll then see a screen. Yes, it's written there as well. You'll see a screen that you can type in your comments and you click submit. Yeah, there you go. And it's like magic, it pops up. So we're going to give you 3 or 4 minutes to do this. If you keep this open, you'll be able to add ideas at any point during the evening, even if it's not on the screen. But thank you. Got 103 responses. I click, that's going to go to the next page, isn't it? Yes. So people are saying words like authentic, living my normal, feeling safe, not being judged. Thank you for the amazing number of responses. So I'll just leave this for a second or two, but I'm going to now hand over to Sarah O'Brien, who is our keynote speaker for tonight. I'll stop this when Sarah gets up here, but you can carry on. If you want to carry on inputting some ideas, then you're very welcome to do so. So, Sarah, that's some water for you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really delighted to introduce Sarah tonight. Sarah, I've known since you were a master's student here.
As an undergrad.
Since you were an undergraduate. I think I knew you best as a master's student, though, to be fair. You're my project student. And it's fantastic to have Sarah back here as an alumnus of the university for this event. Sarah's going to tell you a lot about herself and her journey to thriving, but just to let you know, she's an autistic advocate, she's an academic, she's a published author, and the thing we're most proud of is that she's from Reading.
Just a couple things, really.
So yeah.
So unfortunately, if I feel like these two have stolen my slides because we did them separately, but we come to very similar conclusions. So I'm going to talk to you about thriving or surviving, and the unfortunate fact that most of autistic life is spent simply surviving, and barely at that, because the world is just not very accommodating to us. So I'm Sarah. This is me. I promise, like, I have a point, and I'm very funny while I'm saying it. I'm autistic and dyspraxic, but being really honest, most people just like to call me Sarah. They don't often say, well, actually, no, I lie. My book is titled So I'm Autistic, which really gives the game away very quickly. So let's just figure out how I came to be here with you all today. So pre-2014, the short story is a lot of trauma, a lot of bullying, not a lot of fun really, but there was a lot of stuff around kind of mental health and just trying to figure things out, which then led to an autism diagnosis. Shock, it wasn't just mental health. I got my autism diagnosis in April 2014. As you can see, I started university the same year. That meant I got 0 accommodations for the entirety of my time at school. No one really cared because I was doing really well academically. That doesn't really make up for the fact I really struggled to make any friends. I was kind of having burnout, and I was having shutdowns every day as I got home from school. So I started university, a psychology degree here, in 20. And of the work of the department, and kind of learning more about the research going on here and just getting involved, because I was really keen on the fact that there was a really big focus on autism. I didn't know at the time of applying for my undergrad that there was, or that there was in me, but it was a really serendipitous sort of thing. It's also really nice to reflect on that I had no support up until 2014. But once I got to university, I actually had massive amounts of support, and it was the first time that I'd ever felt actually listened to and heard. And I'm not just saying this because Robert's in the front row. I'm saying this because it's true. Like, I almost dropped out of uni in my 3rd year because I hit such a wall of burnout. But it was actually the Disability Advisory Service and the department that just came around me and made sure that I could make it through, and then do a master's after. Also to say, during my undergrad, I did not do a single presentation in front of a crowd. I would do everything to one person because I just couldn't. Boggling, and just shows how things change. So once I actually graduated and decided to leave Reading, and the very big safety net that I had built around me and all of that kind of certainty and sureness, I started working in the charity sector, namely working in autism charities and working with autistic children and young people, because that's what I'd kind of like felt comfortable in. And I'd also learned a lot about kind of involving people and having them make decisions about their lives while here. I boogied around there for a little bit, got my feet, and then figured out I kind of really liked people having their say, not me being the person to say, you're doing this, but rather them getting to say what they wanted to do. That then led me into a rival university, where I'm now doing a doctorate at King's College London, looking at how we bring people in ways that are inclusive to them. And I'm also now an author, so a little book, So I'm Autistic, taking all of those ideas of, actually, I got my diagnosis, it was a 6-page document, it was not very, what's the word? It was very demoralising, actually. Told me all of the things that I was really rubbish at after someone had spent 3 hours getting to know me really well to say, this is everything that you do really poorly, and then just nothing from there. So having worked with autistic young people, having had no support myself, I decided to package all of that into a book and make sure that not everyone else has to go through that cliff edge of you've waited for this absolute finish line of a marathon to find out you've just met a checkpoint on mile 1. So I also talk about co-production with people. I'm still a student because I don't think I'm able to let that go just yet, although a PhD is not that much fun as an undergrad. And importantly, I'm actually really supported in everything I get to do now. So when I was younger, I was told, and unfortunately this was potentially a mix of educators, parents, adults, CAMHS professionals, not to throw anyone under a bus. I was told that wellbeing is talking through your problems. It's pursuing those hobbies and interests, making sure that you socialise with others. You might be catching a drift here that these might not be the most autism wellbeing things ever. Healthy eating, not chicken nuggets. Exercising your mind and body. So I didn't really vibe with this. This felt like I am fitting myself, probably a very floaty blob, into a very square box. Instead, for me, that looked quite different. Though a lot of this happened before my autism diagnosis, I really enjoyed my very weekly sessions in CAMHS as a teenager, obviously. I didn't have the language to describe my thoughts and feelings because I did not know what a meltdown was. I hadn't heard that term before. I didn't know I was having shutdowns every day as I came home from school. I didn't know that this wasn't just, your garden variety anxiety. This was actually being autistic and having kind of something else going on. So instead, I couldn't describe things. I was just incredibly frustrated. I think my mum would say very angry, and I felt a lot of negativity. I was told that I was really bad at sports. I think that's potentially the bad eyesight and the dyspraxia, and that I didn't have hobbies. Specifically, in my diagnostic report, it says that I don't have any hobbies or interests, as I spoke to someone for 3 hours about Harry Potter and reading, and the fact that I would craft things for hours. No hobbies, no interests. So I didn't know that these things existed, that I could kind of latch, oh, actually, other people have special interests, so do I. I really struggled with friendships, not gonna lie, and being myself. I just didn't know who I was because I was constantly masking to fit into situations. And I also didn't know what masking was. That was something everyone did. It's taken a lot of work to figure out how to unravel that mask and kind of figure out who I am. And it's definitely not easy, and it's not always a safe thing to do. This also meant other people saw different things. They saw a very masked version of me. They saw the academic success and someone who just kept pushing through, although I'd experienced a laundry list of adverse childhood experiences and trauma. I didn't necessarily dwell on that. It's not something I would tell people about or just get involved in my day-to-day life. I was someone who knew I was autistic because I had that lovely bit of paper, but I had no idea what to do with that information. So 2014 wasn't the best time for autism on the internet. I think they were only just starting to really focus on women and girls, and not even that much. I didn't know who I was because I just had this world-changing bit of information given to me, and then just no thing to place me down and kind of ground me in who I was. It was also really unfortunate that my autism diagnosis came when I was in a very acute mental health crisis. So I thought it was something really negative because, of course, I'm having all of these really negative emotions and really difficult times. And they're like, oh, actually, it's not just this, it's actually this. So I couldn't build that positive association yet. And everything I'd seen previously, particularly in school, autism was a slur. So, you know, wasn't the best time to kind of get the diagnosis and then try to figure things out. This is my diagnostic report. I hope I've gotten rid of all of the personal details. So I then had my diagnosis and I tried to fit in. I mean, freshers is a bit of an experience. If you have sensory overload, you're masking and you are trying to find a new routine all in like the space of, well, just no time at all. I did a lot of talking therapy, and as you might have guessed, it didn't necessarily work. I knew that I was being told things that my brain wouldn't kind of work along with, and it just wasn't something I knew would bring me back to feeling well. I needed something different, which is why I actually really enjoyed play therapy, and it was very liberating as a young adult to try that. Trying to fit in kind of really cemented to me that I was surviving, not as an autistic person, but just as someone trying to throw themselves at the world and trying to fit in. It wasn't in any way, shape or form thriving. So I tried to find the change. I understood myself better once I left university. I'd had those kind of training wheel years where I had this really safe environment to find myself, find the things I was interested in, find those hobbies I didn't have. I'd also experienced so much support. So I had a really good specialist mentor. I had a whole package of things around me for when things crumpled and I crumpled and I needed reasonable adjustments with my assignments. I also found friends, shocker, people who I still talk to this day, and people who allowed me to just be me rather than this kind of masked version of myself. I also really thankfully found the autistic community, because I didn't feel like I had autistic people around me growing up, because girls just weren't diagnosed and boys were pulled into special schools. So I just didn't have representation around me other than really bad TV rep. Finding that community and realising I wasn't on my own in all of this was just so important. And I actually felt really okay with being autistic, hence the working with autistic children. I wasn't alone anymore, and I just knew that there were so many others around me. I think this came from a lot of like self-exploration and kind of just appreciating myself, because I've been told for a really long time that I was broken, that I was so different to everyone else, that I would never fit in, and that all of the things I did were just so wrong, which doesn't help anyone. So I did end up finding myself, and that sounds really like gap year, but I promise it's not. It's just finding that sense of me where I'd had no kind of, again, no grounding to figure that out. I'd had the threads throughout my life, but none of it had kind of, the camera hadn't come into focus yet. I also met so many other disabled people, and that's really helped shape my life for the better. And found that shared language. So I learned what a meltdown was, and it's not a panic attack. And not having to over-explain things to people, because they know what I'm talking about. We're sharing the same language. I'm not making any of it up. I'm not putting it on. I'm not doing any of that. I'm making sure that I'm me. And I no longer try to conform. It's something that, like, I just don't do anymore. If I don't want to be there, and I don't want to feel like I'm being like a bit weird, then I won't. So for me, my kind of like key steps that I like reground myself in for thriving, it was really just exploring what autism meant for me, and that took years. I know some people are really speedy with it, and that's really good for them, but that's not how it worked for me. I had to really learn how these diagnostic categories fit into my life, because I hadn't had that as a framework for moved through things like work and different education and relationships. I've found the activities that I enjoy and the boundaries for I'm not going to do that. Please don't make me do that. Finding autistic community and kind of constantly engaging and having friends who are autistic rather than just expecting everyone to, and I don't know, just like get it. Having people that get it makes so much sense. Being my authentic self rather than other people's expectations. I think that's probably really helped by not being in secondary school. I'll be really honest. But although I think most offices are a bit like secondary school playgrounds. I think everyone knows that one. I've adapted my approach to mental health and well-being. So for me, my mental health and well-being is, it shocks me, running. I don't know why, it will just let me get every single ounce of meltdown energy out and just blocks my entire brain out and nothing else can happen apart from don't fall over. Things like, I recently got a dog, he's very cute. Taking him on a walk, getting outside, kind of just doing the things where I get to be me rather than focusing on, oh, I've got to, you know, do that CBT cycle and go around all this. It does not work for me. And then just making sure that I'm constantly learning and staying in tune with myself, because I've still got the same acne as I had at 18, but I'm not the same person. And I've been through so many different things that I just need to keep going back to, okay, who am I now? What do I know about myself from the past? And what does my future look like? That's me. Well, actually, that's the book. It's not me. I also have a website where I very occasionally write things and have thoughts. Thoughts are very occasional. I'm also on Twitter, which is where you can see the dog. He's a 4-month-old golden retriever if you're really interested. And if you have any kind of further questions, just chuck me an email. If you don't want to talk to me in person, that's more than fine. You don't have to come up to me if you don't want to. You can just say a little hello at the tippy tappies. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us, and those of you who are joining online. My name is Dr. Jo Billington, and along with Fiona Knott, I'm one of the project leads for the Wellbeing Hub. What I'm going to do in this last section of the talks tonight is to just talk about our thinking around the project so far and our plan for the first year. And Sarah's lived experience, if you want to call that your personal experience, sharing your personal experience is really relevant here, because the experiences of autistic children and young people and their families have been absolutely central to our thinking around this project and how we might make the best use of the opportunity that we've been given. So what we've been doing for the last year or so is conducting a scoping study, a small qualitative study with 11 autistic children and young people, and 4 parents and carers, and also we're having kind of parallel conversations with professionals, our colleagues that work across education, health and social care. For the autistic young people and the parent carers, we were asking them questions around, what does thriving mean to you? So a bit like the Mentimeter that you've just done. What were the things that helped you thrive, especially when you were younger, for the autistic young people, and what got in the way of that? And also, what can we do with this opportunity? What can the hub provide? With professionals, the conversations that we had with them were really to identify the strengths and the gaps in our local provision, because what we don't want to do is replicate some of the work that's, you know, the amazing work that I'm looking at some people here who are running incredible charities and services that support autistic children and their families, and we don't want to duplicate on that. So what I'm going to do, this study was so rich and so detailed, but what I'm going to do now is just pick out some of the core aspects of it that have been really central in our thinking around the project so far. So the autistic young people that we spoke to, when we were asking them about what helps you thrive, absolutely central to that was a sense of autonomy and agency. And what we mean by that is exactly what Sarah's been talking about, being able to live one's life as authentically as possible, authentically, autistically. And when we started to drill down into, well, what are the component parts of that, we identified 4 key areas. The first is autonomy supporting people. So being surrounded by people who understand, who accept, and who provide support where necessary, but in order to encourage autonomy and agency as opposed to control. Because we were talking to children and young people, these key people tended to be mostly parents and carers, but also playing a really prominent role, of course, our school staff. Again, thinking about the autistic community, connecting with other autistic people, and I promise I didn't read your slides, Sarah, before this was way before that, but everything you said is just basically these 4 things. So yeah, connecting with other autistic people. Some autistic people have described this to us as, finding their tribe, finding their community, and then engaging in personally meaningful activities. So we know that from the broader literature and from talking to autistic people, the absolutely crucial role that hobbies, interests and passions play in the well-being of autistic people. And the key thing that the young people were telling us here was that it was about doing things that they wanted to do as opposed to the things that they felt they ought to do or that they should do or that their peers were doing. And then finally, the 4th component was to be supported in a sense-making process, to be able to understand one's autistic ways of being, to be able to understand oneself and get a true sense of who one was, so that then you could engage in self-advocacy. So these 4 component parts have played an absolutely central role in thinking about what we might do in year 1. And we've limited this to year 1 because we wanted to start with something. But as Fiona's already talked about, we want this to be a co-productive exercise. We want to work with you as a community to develop what it is that we're going to be doing. So these are just our starters for 10, if you like. So in terms of autonomy supporting people, thinking about the key role that parent carers and professionals play, the first thing we're going to be doing is starting a parent support group. But this is rooted in the idea of how does it feel to be an autistic child? Our participants in our scoping study told us that what they valued most in their families was actually their real understanding of who they were. So we are going to be focusing on that. We've got a pilot study starting in January. If you're interested or know somebody who might be, then if you haven't done already via Eventbrite, please sign up to our newsletter and you'll be the first to know when we start advertising for recruitment for that. We're also going to be kickstarting again our termly practitioner special interest group, which many of you here in the room today may remember from pre-pandemic days. This is a group for practitioners to get together to develop their skills and their understanding, but also to engage in really meaningful networking opportunities. Our first one starts on the 21st of Feb. It's based here at the university, and Dr. Mary Evans, who's Clinical Director and Neurodiversity Lead at the Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, will be kicking us off. And she'll be talking about how she and her team have developed a neurodiversity affirming strategy for Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust. Fiona and I, and also other members of our team, will be providing training to schools and workplaces as well on neurodiversity affirming approaches that are absolutely rooted in what autistic children and young people tell us they need, they want, and what works for them. In terms of autistic community, we're going to be starting off with a series of free online monthly talks that are open to everybody. We start on the 11th of January with Anne Memott, who'll be talking about sensory comfort for autistic people. On the 8th of Feb, we've got Andy Smith from Spectrum Gaming, who's going to be talking about creating hope through autistic community. And on the 7th of March, we've got Sarah Jane Critchley, who'll be talking about autistic joy. And a special hello to all 3 of them who are joining us online tonight. Future ideas, though, we want to be working with autistic children and young people. We want to be working directly with autistic children and young people. And we've got some ideas around that, but we need help to flesh those ideas out, to design them and develop them. Our small scoping study, the participants in that indicated that in terms of sense making, what they would really benefit from is some support to be able to understand their own autistic identity, to explore what that means in a safe and supported way. Similarly, how do they go about negotiating disclosure of their diagnosis in a safe way with the people that they meet throughout their lives? And again, as Sarah was saying, actually hearing from other autistic young people about what does a meltdown feel like? What does anxiety feel like for this particular person? Oh, maybe something like sensory overwhelm, maybe some of those more challenging aspects of the autistic experience. Hearing other young people talk about that can help to normalise those experiences and again, connect to other people. And then in terms of engaging in meaningful activities, we've got some ideas around maybe running hobby groups or interest sharing, but again, these are just ideas. Community is absolutely central to what we're trying to do with this project. And we are so delighted that all of you here today in person and watching online are with us at the very beginning of starting this community, because we definitely want this to be a conversation. So with that in mind, we're going to go to our second Mentimeter exercise, please. And we would like to ask you all, what do we do? What do you want us to do? Where do we go from here? And I'm just going to move that across. Again, it's the same. Is it the same code? 62032285, yes. Can show a winner as well somehow. I don't know how that works, but are people responding? Can't get on. Oh, you can do a thumbs up, but you can't get on. Right, I'm going to refresh. Oh. Well, it had to happen, didn't it? It absolutely had to happen. Right, okay. Can you quickly make another one? Oh yeah, use the same one as before.
Yeah, we thought we'd sorted that. We thought we had, thank you. If we go to the other one. Yeah, try that.
Can you add anything to the
So we can't see it, that's trouble.
yeah. Does that one work? So put your responses in there. Yes, a great idea.
Yes, please.
Laura's had a great idea. If you start your response with a number 2 and a full stop, that means it's the second question. So
Otherwise.
yeah, otherwise we're thinking, how are we going to analyse this? The question is, what do you want us to do? Where do we go from here? How can we best use this opportunity with the Wellbeing Hub to support autistic children and young people and their families? It's all going so well. Of course, the question is, where do we go from here? What would you like us to do? What can we do with this? I realise it's like 6 questions. What can we do with this opportunity, with the Wellbeing Hub? How can we help? Again, we tried and we failed. And it happens when it's my slot. But we will be sharing these with you, by the way. So once we have analysed the results, we will be giving you an overview. So you will get feedback on this. Okay. I'm going to allow you to keep doing that because the Menti will stay open, and I'm just going to switch back. Just to talk about next steps. So I've already mentioned that there will be a summary of the Mentimeter responses. In the new year, we're going to be using those as a way of shaping a survey that is going to ask more detailed questions, but we need your responses to know what questions to ask. So that will be coming out in the new year. We're also developing a new section of the Centre for Autism website for the Wellbeing Hub, but we want autistic children and young people to help us do that. So that's why we don't have that up and running at the moment. If you haven't already signed up to our newsletter via your Eventbrite booking, please email autism@reading.ac.uk, and our lovely colleague Hazel will be able to sign you up to the newsletter so you can hear about updates. And also the recording of tonight's talks and the slides will be sent to everybody who booked on Eventbrite to attend. Thank you all very much. I'm going to hand over to Carmel now.
Thanks, Jo. So I'm just going to finish up by thanking a few people who haven't already been happened. Thank you all very much for coming. It's really important to us that we have felt so supported and had such a positive response from the autistic community about this activity that we've put so many years of hard work into making this happen. But there are two people in particular that I want to thank who haven't yet been thanked, without whom it wouldn't have been possible. I know these are common words to say, but it's absolutely true in this case. This would not have happened if it weren't for Fiona Knott in particular, and also Jo Billington. So I'd like you to join me in thanking them. Thank you to Sarah for her very interesting and insightful talk earlier on. I think that was really helpful to me to understand the importance of this venture. And thank you to Robert, the Vice-Chancellor, for joining us tonight as well. At this point, we say farewell to those who have joined us online. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. And for those who are here in person, we'd like to invite you to carry on the conversation. We weren't able to see your responses to the Menti, but perhaps you can tell us some of the ideas you have about what the Centre for Autism Wellbeing Hub might be able to do in future to help over a drink. And so we have a reception now with tea and coffee and biscuits in the rooms just on the other side of the building, at the back of the building. And you'll also have the opportunity to look at some of the research posters from the Centre for Autism Research Group as well. So please do join us if you'd like to carry on the conversation. So thank you for joining us tonight.